So, good morning, everyone. We'll begin with the reflections on universal well-being. May I abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may I maintain well-being in myself. May everyone abide in well-being, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may they maintain well-being in themselves. May all be released from all suffering, and may they not be parted from the good fortune they have attained. When they act upon intention, all beings are the owners of their action and inherit its results. Their future is born from such action, companion to such action, and results will be their home. All actions with intention, be they skillful or harmful, of such acts they will be the heirs. So today I'll continue to read from Ajahn Mun's biography, the section that I find very inspiring, which is when he wakes up and becomes an arhat. So I'll continue to read his awakening story. So here he says, Acharya Mun turned his attention to the nature of his inner Dhamma. He said that the moment of realization, when Dhamma arises in all its glory within the citta, that's the mind heart, is a moment that's completely unimaginable. Dhamma's true nature reveals itself in a totally unexpected manner, as it is inconceivable and impossible to speculate about beforehand. You can think of the Buddha's awakening words, right? Amazing, amazing. And the sixth patriarch has the same reflection when he wakes up. He says, unexpected, how unexpected. At that moment, he felt as though he had died and been born again into a new life, a uniquely amazing death and rebirth. The quality of awareness intrinsic to this transformation was a state of knowing that he had never before experienced, even though it had always been there, unchanging. Suddenly then, it became apparent, spectacular and inconceivably amazing. It was this quintessential quality that caused Acharya Mun to consider somewhat unconventionally that it would be not possible to teach others this Dhamma because they would never be able to truly understand it. Since his early days of practice, Acharya Mun always possessed a very dynamic character. That distinguishing characteristic was evident at the moment of his final attainment, which was so unforgettable for him that we later tell his story to inspire his disciples. Once his citta had completely overthrown the cycle of rebirths, of repeated births and deaths, it appeared to make 3 revolutions, circling around the newly arisen vivata citta. Upon conclusion of the first revolution, the Pali term lopo, which means cutting off, arose together with its essential meaning. At that moment, the citta had completed the function of totally excluding all vestiges of relative conventional reality. Upon conclusion of the second revolution, the Pali term vimutti, absolute freedom, arose together with its essential meaning. At that moment, the citta had completed the function of attaining total release. Upon conclusion of the third revolution, the Pali term analio, total detachment, rose together with its essential meaning. At that moment, the citta had completed the function of wholly severing all attachments. Citta and Dhamma were then one and the same. Eka citta, eka Dhamma. That's one citta, one Dhamma. The true nature of the citta is synonymous with the true nature of Dhamma. Unlike relative conventional reality, there is no duality. This is vimutti Dhamma, pure and simple. It is absolute in its singularity and devoid of any trace of relative conventional reality within. The pure Dhamma is fully realized only once. It never requires further perfection. He goes on, but I'm going to keep moving on here. Throughout the remainder of the night, Acharya Mun considered with a sense of dismay how pathetically ignorant he had been in the past, being dragged endlessly from one existence to another, like a puppet, like all of us. He wept as he thought of how he finally came upon a pool of crystal clear, wondrous tasting water. He had reached Nang Ao, that sparkling pool of pure Dhamma the Lord Buddha and his arhat disciples encountered and then proclaimed the world over 2,500 years ago. Having at last encountered it himself, he tirelessly paid heartfelt homage, prostrating himself over and over again to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Should people have seen him then, tears streaming down his face as he prostrated over and over again, surely they would assume that this monk was suffering immensely, shedding tears so profusely. They probably would have suspected him of beseeching the guardian spirits living in all directions to help ease his pain, or else some being on the verge of madness, for his behavior was extremely unusual. In fact, he had just arrived at the truth of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha with utmost clarity, as epigmatized in the maxim, "He who sees the Dhamma sees the Tathagata, and thus abides in the presence of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha." Acharya Mun was simply engaged in the kind of conduct befitting someone who was overwhelmed by a sincere sense of gratitude. So again, he talks a little bit more about going out on alms round, but I thought this was an interesting part here. He says, when all the celestial Devas come to visit him, eager to hear the Dhamma, all the Devas came to visit Acharya Mun the following night. Both terrestrial Devas, the spirits and gods who are on the earth, right, nature spirits, and celestial Devas arrived in groups, hailing from nearly every direction. Each group described the amazing radiance caused by the incredible power of his Dhamma the previous night. They compared it to a magnificent tremor that passed through all the celestial abodes in the vast realms of all the world systems. This tremor was accompanied by a fantastic incandescence that rendered the length and breadth of the upper and lower realms ineffably translucent. This is described in the Lotus Sutra, as well as some of the other texts about this kind of bright radiance that just illuminates everything. They told him, this is the Devas speaking, those of us with intuitive knowledge were able to see unobstructed throughout the entire universe due to the luminous quality of the Dhamma pouring forth from your person, Venerable Sir. Its brilliance was far more radiant than the light of 100 or even 1,000 suns. It is truly unbearable to think that there were those who missed seeing such a wonder. Only humans and animals, living futile, earthbound existences, could be so incredibly blind and unperceptive as to have been unaware of last night's splendor. Devas everywhere were so stunned, astonished, and utterly amazed that they let out an emphatic exclamation of approval to express their exultation at the perfection of your achievement. Mudita, right, rejoicing. If it were not such an absolutely amazing achievement, how could knowledge of it have been so widespread? You, Venerable Sir, are a person of saintly virtue, majestic power, and vast influence, capable of being a refuge to a great number of beings in numerous realms of existence. All will be able to find blessed comfort in the shadow of your greatness. Beings of every class, be they humans, devas, or brahmas, living underwater, on land, or in the air, are rarely fortunate enough to encounter such perfection. We devas consider ourselves especially blessed to have met you, Venerable Sir, having the precious opportunity to pay our respects to you and receive your beneficent teaching. We are grateful to you for expounding the Dhamma to brighten our hearts, leading us on the path of practice that we can gradually become aware of how to improve ourselves. When the assemblies of Devas finally returned to their respective realms, Ajahn Mun began to reflect on the tremendous difficulties he had experienced in his effort to realize this Dhamma. Because his practice had entailed such exceptional hardship, he regarded as Dhamma as the threshold of death. The Dhamma at the threshold of death. Had he not come so close to death while struggling to reach freedom from dukkha, then surely he would have never attained that freedom. I'll just read that much. There's a couple more sections that are quite interesting. The Buddhas come to visit him. In fact, he had a spiritual partner from the past who also comes to visit him, was actually quite distraught, saying, "We made vows to become Buddhas together, and now you've become an arhat. Have you given up on me?" And so I find it very fascinating to read this account of Ajahn Mun and Acharya Mahabua describing this process of what happens when you wake up, or when we wake up. All of us have this potential. So maybe I think that's inspiration, that all of us have this potential, something deep inside that is bright and luminous, completely free, unattached, boundless, that can connect to the entire universe. It's, you could say, our intrinsic nature, sometimes described, our true potential. And so perhaps right now we might not have access to it directly, but if we know it's there in our hearts and we're moving in that direction, little bit by little bit, day by day, I think it gives us some inner compass to steer ourselves by. That this practice doesn't end in suffering and darkness, and in fact ends in true happiness, liberation, and boundless light. Okay, so maybe just that much for this morning. And tomorrow we can hear about when the Buddhas visit him. What is their conversation? And actually, it's very interesting, because usually in the Pali Canon, the Buddhas do not come back to speak to you. So this is somewhat unconventional within the Pali tradition.